This 1868 portrait looks normal, until you see what the enslaved boy holds. Sarah Bennett's hands trembled as she adjusted the magnification on her computer screen. The April afternoon light filtered through the windows of the Virginia Historical Society's archive room, casting long shadows across her desk. She had been cataloging Civil War-era photographs for 3 months, and most had blurred into a monotonous stream of formal portraits and battlefield scenes, but this one was different. The photograph, dated 1868, showed the Whitmore family of Richmond, Virginia. 5 white family members sat rigidly in their finest clothes, arranged in the typical Victorian parlor setting. The father stood behind his seated wife, their 3 children positioned around them with practiced precision. Everything appeared ordinary, a standard post-war portrait of a prosperous Southern family attempting to reclaim their former dignity. But at the edge of the frame, barely visible in the shadowed background, stood a young black boy. He couldn't have been more than 12 years old, dressed in simple clothes that marked him as a servant. His eyes stared directly at the camera with an intensity that made Sarah pause. Something about his expression seemed deliberate, almost defiant. Sarah leaned closer to the screen, zooming in on the boy's hands. Her breath caught in her throat. Clutched against his chest was a small leather-bound book, and on its cover she could barely make out what appeared to be embossed symbols. In 1868, just 3 years after the end of slavery, this should not have been remarkable. But the way he held it, the positioning, the deliberate display, it felt intentional. She zoomed in further, her heart racing. The symbols on the book's cover became clearer. A star, a cross, and what looked like the letter F, intertwined with a circular pattern. These weren't random decorations. Sarah had seen similar markings before, in her research on underground railroad codes and clandestine literacy networks. This can't be coincidental, she whispered to the empty room. Sarah spent the next hour examining every pixel of the digitized photograph. The quality was remarkably sharp for 1868. Suggesting the photographer had been skilled and the equipment expensive. She noted the registration number on the archive file, VHS 1868 42 W. The W indicated it came from the Whitmore family collection, donated to the Historical Society in 1952. She pulled up the donor records. Margaret Whitmore, great-granddaughter of the family in the photograph, had left her entire estate to the society, including dozens of photographs, letters, and personal documents. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, searching the database for any mention of the boy in the photograph. Nothing. Not a single reference. This wasn't unusual. Enslaved people and their descendants were rarely named in family records. Their identities erased as thoroughly as their freedom had been. But the book troubled her. By 1868, literacy among freed black Americans was no longer legal, yet it remained dangerous. Many southern states had enacted black codes that severely restricted the rights of freed people, and white supremacist violence was reaching a fever pitch. Sarah printed a high-resolution copy of the photograph and studied it under her desk lamp. The symbols on the book were definitely intentional. The star had 5 points, each point containing a tiny mark she couldn't quite decipher. The cross wasn't a simple Christian cross, but had extended arms with small notations at each end. And the F was ornate, almost calligraphic, wound through with a circle that contained what might have been letters or numbers. She grabbed her phone and called Dr. Marcus Williams, a colleague at Howard University who specialized in African-American literacy movements during Reconstruction. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Marcus, I need your eyes on something," Sarah said, her voice urgent. "I found a photograph from 1868 with symbols I've never seen before. Can I send it to you?" "Send it now," Marcus replied, catching her tone. "I'm in my office." Sarah attached the image and waited, her leg bouncing nervously under the desk. 2 minutes passed. Then her phone rang. "Sarah," Marcus said slowly, "where did you find this?" Marcus arrived at the Virginia Historical Society the next morning, carrying a worn leather satchel and an expression of barely contained excitement. Sarah met him in the lobby, and they hurried to her research room where she had spread out everything related to the Whitmore family across 2 tables. "Tell me what you see," Sarah said, pointing to the enlarged photograph on her monitor. Marcus pulled reading glasses from his pocket and leaned in close. For a long moment he said nothing, his eyes moving methodically across the image. Finally he straightened and turned to Sarah with an intensity she had rarely seen in him. "The star is a freedom mark," he said quietly. "I've only seen it twice before, both times in documents from South Carolina. It was used by underground literacy circles, groups that taught reading and writing in secret, even after emancipation, when it was theoretically legal, but practically suicidal in many areas." He pointed to each symbol as he spoke. "The cross with extended arms is a meeting marker. Each arm represents a safe house or gathering location. And this F wound through the circle? That's a preservation code. It meant someone was keeping records, birth certificates, marriage documents, bills of sale that proved family connections. Everything the system tried to destroy." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "So this boy wasn't just holding a book, he was holding evidence of an entire network." "Exactly. And he's displaying it openly in a white family's portrait." Marcus shook his head in wonder. Either he was incredibly brave or incredibly desperate to preserve this information. They spent the morning combing through the Whitmore family papers. The collection included account ledgers, correspondence, legal documents, and dozens of photographs. The family had owned a tobacco plantation before the war, with records showing they held 43 enslaved people in 1860. After the war, the plantation had continued operating with paid labor, though the wages listed in the ledgers were insultingly small. Sarah found a letter dated March 1868, written by Thomas Whitmore to his brother in Maryland. Her eyes widened as she read aloud. The freedmen grow increasingly bold in their presumptions. Several have been seen with books and papers, gathering in the old tobacco barn on Thursday evenings. I have warned them, but they persist in this dangerous education. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sarah was reviewing the Whitmore family's post-war tax records when she noticed an annotation in faded pencil on a property assessment form from 1869. Cabin repairs, Samuel's roof leak, $350. Samuel. Finally, a name. She immediately began searching for any other mentions of Samuel in the collection. Marcus joined her, and together they went through every document with renewed focus. By late afternoon, they had found 6 more references. Payment records for farm work, a note about medical treatment for a fever, and most significantly, a complaint letter from Thomas Whitmore to the local Freedmen's Bureau, dated November 1868. I am writing to report the insolent behavior of the Negro Samuel, approximately 13 years of age, who resides on my property, the letter read. He has been observed teaching other freedmen to read, using materials of unknown origin. Despite repeated warnings, he continues this activity, creating unrest among the workers. I request the Bureau's assistance in curtailing this disruption. Sarah looked at Marcus, her eyes bright. He was 13, just a child, and he was running a school. Not just running it, Marcus added, pointing to the phrase, materials of unknown origin. He had resources, books, papers, teaching materials that didn't come from the Whitmores, which means he was connected to something bigger. They contacted the Freedmen's Bureau Records Archive at the National Archives. 3 days later, Sarah received a digital file containing the Bureau's response to Thomas Whitmore's complaint. The agent assigned to investigate had visited the property in December 1868 and interviewed Samuel. The report was brief, but revealing. Spoke with the boy Samuel. He claims he learned letters from his mother before her death in 1865. Found him to be intelligent and respectful. He teaches basic reading to 6 adults and 4 children on Thursday evenings. Materials appear to be donated primers and a Bible. No evidence of seditious activity. Recommend no action. The freedmen have a legal right to education. Sarah's throat tightened. His mother taught him while slavery was still legal. That means she risked everything to give him that gift. Marcus nodded solemnly. And he honored her by passing it on. Asto! Sarah and Marcus expanded their investigation beyond the Whitmore papers. They requested records from surrounding counties, searching for any connection to Samuel or the symbols they had identified. The Virginia Historical Society's librarian, an elderly woman named Dorothy Chen, who had worked there for 40 years, proved unexpectedly helpful. You're looking at Reconstruction literacy networks? Dorothy asked, peering over her glasses at the photograph. You should check the Richmond African Baptist Church records. They documented everything. The church archives, housed in a climate-controlled vault, contained membership rolls, meeting minutes, and correspondence dating back to 1841. Sarah and Marcus spent 2 full days carefully reviewing documents from 1865 to 1870. What they found astounded them. The Richmond African Baptist Church had established what they called a reading circle in early 1866, just months after the war ended. The group met under the pretense of Bible study, but actually operated as a comprehensive literacy program. More remarkably, they had created a network of similar circles across Virginia, using traveling preachers and teachers to spread reading materials and instruction. In a ledger from 1867, Sarah found a list of students that included adults and children from multiple counties. Beside each name was a notation system: stars, crosses, letters, and numbers. She recognized the symbols immediately. They matched those on the book in Samuel's hands. It's a tracking system, Marcus said, his voice filled with awe. They were documenting who learned to read, where they were located, and their skill level. This wasn't just informal education. It was organized, systematic, and sophisticated. A letter dated August 1868, written by Reverend Isaiah Turner to a colleague in Petersburg, mentioned Samuel by name. The boy Samuel shows exceptional promise. He has mastered reading and basic arithmetic and now assists with the Thursday gatherings near the Whitmore property. We have provided him with primers and a record book. His dedication honors his late mother's sacrifice. The record book. Sarah felt electricity run through her. The book in the photograph isn't just any book, it's their record book. He's literally holding the evidence of the entire network. Marcus suggested they try to locate Samuel's descendants. It was a long shot. Family connections had been systematically destroyed during slavery, and many records were lost or deliberately erased. But Sarah had become obsessed with the story. Samuel's face haunted her, that direct gaze into the camera, the defiant clutching of the forbidden knowledge. They started with census records, searching for Samuel in Richmond and surrounding counties from 1870 onward. The 1870 census listed dozens of men and boys named Samuel, but none with ages and locations that matched perfectly. Sarah was about to give up when Marcus found a notation in the Freedmen's Bureau records from 1872. Samuel Robinson, formerly of the Whitmore property, now employed as a teacher at the colored school in Manchester, Virginia. Robinson. He had taken a surname after freedom, as many formerly enslaved people did. The Manchester school records were fragmentary, but they confirmed that Samuel Robinson had taught there from 1872 to 1875. After that, the trail went cold. Sarah expanded her search, checking property records, marriage certificates, death records. Finally, she found him. Samuel Robinson died 1921 in Richmond, Virginia, aged approximately 66. He had married a woman named Clara in 1879, and they had 5 children. Through genealogical databases and considerable persistence, Sarah traced Samuel's lineage to a woman named Patricia Robinson living in Washington, D.C. When Sarah called and explained her research, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "My great-great-grandfather," Patricia finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "We always knew he was a teacher, but we never knew the details. He died before my grandmother was old enough to remember much." Sarah invited Patricia to Richmond. When she arrived a week later, Sarah showed her the photograph. Patricia stared at the image of the young boy for a long time, tears streaming down her face. "He's so young," she whispered. "So brave." Patricia shared what little family history had been passed down. Samuel had been separated from his mother when he was 10 years old, sold to the Whitmores in 1865, just months before emancipation. His mother had died shortly after, circumstances unknown. Patricia mentioned something that sent Sarah's investigation in a new direction. "My grandmother used to say that Samuel kept a journal, but it was lost when the family had to move during the Depression. She said it had secret marks in it that only he understood." Secret marks. Sarah immediately thought of the symbols on the book in the photograph. She returned to the Whitmore family papers with fresh determination, this time looking for anything that might have belonged to Samuel or contained similar symbols. In a box of miscellaneous documents, tucked inside an 1869 almanac, she found a folded piece of paper covered in what appeared to be random sketches and notations. But when Sarah examined it closely, she recognized the star, cross, and circular F pattern repeated throughout. Between these symbols were names, dates, and locations, written in a cramped, careful hand. Marcus brought in a colleague from the Virginia Commonwealth University, Dr. Lisa Hayes, who specialized in coded communication among enslaved and freed communities. Dr. Hayes spent hours analyzing the document, comparing it with other known examples of covert record-keeping. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Hayes said, her voice reverent. "It's a register of families. See here, this star indicates someone who learned to read. The cross marks where they lived, and these circles with initials, those are family connections that were severed by slavery. He was reconstructing family trees, helping people find relatives who had been sold away." She pointed to a section near the bottom of the page. "Here's Samuel's own entry. His mother's name was Ruth. She was sold to the Whitmores from a plantation in North Carolina in 1863. Before that, she had been in South Carolina. And look, he's marked 3 other people with the same symbol. Siblings or cousins, most likely." Sarah felt her throat constrict. Samuel hadn't just been teaching people to read. He had been helping them reclaim their stolen histories, their severed connections, their very identities. They found 2 more pages of similar notations hidden in different parts of the Whitmore collection. Together, they documented over 200 individuals, their literacy status, their locations, and their family connections. It was a treasure trove of historical data, but more than that, it was evidence of extraordinary courage and determination. As Sarah and Marcus pieced together the full scope of Samuel's work, a larger picture emerged. The Literacy Network wasn't just about education, it was about resistance, survival, and the preservation of humanity in the face of systematic dehumanization. Cross-referencing Samuel's records with other historical documents, they discovered that at least 37 of the people he taught went on to become teachers themselves, spreading literacy across Virginia and into neighboring states. Others used their newfound skills to secure legal documents, claim property rights, and protect themselves from exploitation. Most remarkably, they found evidence that Samuel and his network had hidden copies of important documents, freedom papers, birth records, marriage certificates, in locations across Richmond, creating a distributed archive that would survive even if individual copies were destroyed. The symbols in his records indicated where these documents were cached. Sarah contacted the current property owners of several locations marked in Samuel's records. At the site of the old tobacco barn mentioned in Thomas Whitmore's letter, now part of a community park, archaeological students conducted a careful excavation. 3 feet below ground, wrapped in oilcloth and sealed in a metal box, they found a collection of documents dating from 1866 to 1870. The papers included literacy primers, handwritten teaching materials, and most precious of all, a leather-bound record book, the same book Samuel held in the photograph. Its cover bore the star, cross, and circular F pattern, exactly as they appeared in the image. Inside, Samuel had written in careful script, "For those who come after. So you will know who you are and where you came from. So you will know that we resisted, that we learned, that we remembered. Your names are here. Your people are here. You are not forgotten." The book contained detailed records of over 300 individuals, including full names, family connections, places of origin, and notes on their progress in learning to read and write. On the final page, Samuel had written, "My mother Ruth taught me that knowledge is freedom. I teach others so that her sacrifice lives on. May this record survive to reconnect what slavery tore apart." Sarah organized a gathering at the Virginia Historical Society to present the findings. Patricia Robinson was there, along with 15 other descendants of people documented in Samuel's records. Marcus had spent weeks using the information to trace family lines, connecting people who had never known they were related. The photograph was displayed on a large screen, Samuel's young face looking out at the assembled crowd. Sarah explained the symbols, the hidden network, the extraordinary courage it took to preserve knowledge and identity in such dangerous times. Samuel was 13 years old in this photograph, Sarah said, her voice catching. Just a child. He had lost his mother, survived slavery, and was facing a world that still wanted to deny him his humanity. But instead of succumbing to that cruelty, he dedicated his life to helping others reclaim what had been stolen from them. Patricia approached the photograph and placed her hand gently on the screen. "He's not in the shadows anymore," she said softly. None of them are. The descendants examined the record book, finding the names of their ancestors written in Samuel's careful hand. Tears flowed freely as connections were made, as family histories were reconstructed, as the deliberately erased were finally seen. One woman, Clara Henderson, discovered that her great-great-grandmother had learned to read in Samuel's Thursday evening classes. "I teach 4th grade," she said, her voice breaking. "I had no idea that teaching was in my blood, that my ancestor learned from someone so brave. It makes what I do feel even more important." The Virginia Historical Society announced plans to create a permanent exhibition about Samuel and the Literacy Network. The photograph would be its centerpiece. No longer just a portrait of a white family, but a testament to the indomitable will of a young boy who refused to let his people's stories be forgotten. In the months following the discovery, Sarah's research sparked a wave of similar investigations across the South. Historians began examining other photographs from the Reconstruction era, with fresh eyes, looking for hidden symbols and overlooked figures in the backgrounds. Several more covert record-keeping systems were discovered, revealing a vast network of resistance and preservation that had operated largely beneath the notice of white society. Samuel's record book was carefully conserved and digitized. Genealogists and descendants used it to reconstruct family trees, finding relatives across the country and sometimes around the world. The information he had so carefully preserved became a bridge across the chasm created by slavery, reconnecting families who had believed their histories were forever lost. Patricia Robinson worked with Sarah to establish the Samuel Robinson Educational Foundation, which provided scholarships to descendants of people documented in the Literacy Network. At the first scholarship ceremony, Patricia spoke about her great-great-grandfather's legacy. "Samuel understood something profound," she said, "that our humanity couldn't be stolen as long as we remembered who we were. That knowledge was power, but so was memory. He gave us both, preserved in secret marks and hidden records, waiting for the day when we would be ready to reclaim them." The photograph itself took on new meaning. What had once appeared to be a simple portrait of a white Southern family was now recognized as something far more complex, a moment of silent rebellion, a deliberate act of historical documentation, a young boy's defiant assertion that he existed, that he mattered, that his people's stories would not be erased. Sarah often found herself staring at Samuel's face in the photograph, still awed by his courage. He looked directly at the camera, directly across time, holding that symbol-marked book against his chest like a shield. He had known somehow that someone would eventually see, would eventually understand, would eventually tell his story. In a world that tried to make him invisible, Samuel had made himself unforgettable. His photograph, his records, his legacy, all of it whispered the same truth across the decades. We were here, we mattered, we survived, we remembered. And now finally, the world was listening.